On Egypt's Giza Plateau, the Sphinx stands guard over the pyramids, the oldest and most famous structures in the world. We've come to believe they were built simply as tombs for ancient pharaohs. But were they? Or do new investigations point to a much larger purpose? One that could even change our ideas about when civilization began. The pyramids were built during Egypt's 4th dynasty, about 4,500 years ago. They're one of the 7 wonders of the world, monuments whose mysteries have provoked centuries of debate. Egyptologists insist that they were tombs, the same as other pyramids along the Nile Valley. But now a new breed of investigators is asking questions and challenging that idea. Sleuths like Robert Bovell, a construction engineer, and writer Graham Hancock.
Textbooks say that these pyramids were royal tombs like all the others, but no mummies were found inside Giza, no inscriptions, nothing. Besides, some of these 4th dynasty pharaohs built 2 pyramids. Why? Did they intend to be buried in both places at once? And why did none of them leave inscriptions? Why did none of them make clear to posterity that he was the owner?
Ask yourself this. If you'd just built the biggest tomb in human history after decades of cost and effort, would you leave the world guessing about your identity? Isn't it likely that there's something much more to all this than just tombs and tombs only? Could this be part of some very different scheme?
The date Egyptologists fix as the beginning of Egyptian civilization is 3000 BC, about 500 years before the pyramids were built. Before that, they claimed the land was populated by Stone Age wanderers. Bovell is skeptical.
According to the textbooks, Egypt only just emerged from the Stone Age. And suddenly, just like that, we're able to produce these enormous and perfect structures. And all this for what? To cover the body of a dead king. This tomb-only theory doesn't make sense. And despite 100 years of scientific investigation, many vital questions remain unanswered.
The pyramids on the Giza Plateau are unlike any ever built in Egypt before or since. Their predecessors from the 3rd dynasty are mountains of crumbling brick. Their 5th century successors are piles of rubble. Hancock explains.
It's as though in the 3rd dynasty they built the Model T Ford. In the 4th dynasty, they built the Porsche. Then in the 5th dynasty, for some bizarre reason, they reverted to the penny-farthing bicycle of pyramids. It really doesn't make any kind of sense.
The pyramids don't excite everybody's curiosity. Egyptologists aren't much interested in them and believe that speculation, especially about the Great Pyramid, has gone too far.
Pyramids, in general, are not very popular with Egyptologists because I think they're too plentiful. There are about 100 of them. And also, I think they've acquired something of a bad name because they've attracted so many cranks.
The Great Pyramid has this power over people. In my view, it has the power to destroy common sense.
But if the pyramids were simply tombs, then why were the Egyptians so obsessed with the pyramids' dimensions and with their orientation on the earth? They lie almost exactly along the 30th parallel. The relationship of the Great Pyramid's circumference to its height is the same as that of the Earth's circumference to its radius from the pole. Egyptologists don't dispute this, they just deny that it was done on purpose.
Is this a simple coincidence? Or is it possible that these people knew the exact shape and dimensions of the Earth? Miraculously, too, these gigantic structures are impeccably aligned to the cardinal directions. Perfectly east-west and perfectly north-south. The precision of these alignments is uncanny and hasn't been achieved in any modern structure. How is it possible that such precision could have been achieved almost 5,000 years ago? 500 years ago, our own civilization wasn't even sure that the Earth is a sphere. And it wasn't until 300 years ago that we knew for certain the exact dimensions of the Earth. But these people knew, because the Great Pyramid turns out to be a mathematical model of the Northern Hemisphere on a scale of 1 to 43,200.
The Great Pyramid also incorporates the value of pi in its construction, a transcendental number thought to have been discovered by the Greeks. And even the slope of the pyramid's walls is odd and complicated.
It's clear that what we have here is an advanced system of mathematics and technology at a time when this isn't supposed to have existed. And to achieve these results, the ancient builders had to use a slope of 52 degrees. Any other slope just wouldn't work. Can all these things be coincidence?
The accuracy of these monuments is almost obsessive. Take the sides of the Great Pyramid. They're each 755 feet long, yet the average variation in the side length is barely 5 inches. We're talking 0.01 of a single percent. Such incredible precision would stretch to breaking point the capacities of modern construction crews. So it's hard to imagine how it was done by primitives only just emerging from the Stone Age.
There's still more worth pondering, like the size of the building blocks.
Some of these blocks, high up in the body of the Great Pyramid, each weigh as much as 100 family-sized cars. Egyptologists remain strangely unpuzzled by this, but frankly, we're very puzzled indeed.
I'm an engineer, and I can tell you that to raise blocks of this size to such heights requires a special crane. Now, for a people who did not have that sort of machines, not even the simplest pulley or the wheel, and using simple copper tools, how could they do this?
Deep within the pyramid, inside a room called the King's Chamber, there is a granite chest so skillfully made it would challenge even modern-day machines. Chris Dunn is a drilling expert.
This is an incredible piece of work and a mystery. How did they do it? The typical way of doing it primitively would be with a bow saw, a bow drill, and they would advance the tool into the piece using sand or a diamond. And to me, that would just take too long, too many years to do this.
Well, let me ask you this then. How do you think they did it?
I think that they had to have used some power tool. Today, if we were to drill this, we would advance the drill into the granite at a rate of 2/10,000ths of an inch per revolution of the drill.
Do you think their drills could possibly have been turning as fast as that?
No, they were advancing a lot faster than that.
Faster?
Faster. The drills were advancing into the granite at a rate of 100,000ths of a revolution.
The investigators admit the idea is controversial, but the fact is, the Egyptians were able to cut granite and even diorite, the hardest stone in nature, and drill out the inside of diorite vases where modern-day tools couldn't even reach.
How did they do this? Look at the tightness of the lid. It's all even, huh?
Like opticians work.
In the king's chamber, there's another mystery the investigators don't think has been adequately solved.
This is the real mystery.
Cutting through the wall are a number of precision-made shafts. Egyptologists claim they're ventilation shafts, air conditioning for the dead monarch.
But there's no way these could have been ventilation shafts. The detail of design is far too complicated. They rise on the incline all the way out to the pyramid. They must have had a much higher purpose.
But what kind of purpose? Bovell and Hancock began to believe the 5,000-year-old monuments were built to send a message to future generations. The investigators wanted to decipher that message and turned to astronomy for clues.
Scholars say that the ancient Egyptians did not have a high knowledge of astronomy. But here is evidence of their fascination and sophisticated knowledge of the sky. Look at the zodiac constellations: Leo, Taurus, Pisces, and here the constellation of Orion and the star Sirius.
Bovell was convinced the shaft from the king's chamber was targeted at the constellation of Orion. He set out to prove it on the computer.
Obviously, they didn't go to all this trouble just for fun. To the ancient Egyptian, Orion was Osiris, the high god of resurrection. Now, this is a reconstruction of the sky in 2500 BC. And let's see what happens to Orion's belt as it crosses the north-south line.
A perfect alignment to Orion and the god Osiris.
Now, to the left of Orion, here is the star Sirius. To the ancient Egyptians, it was the star of Isis, the consort of Osiris. And I was amazed to discover this.
Just as the king's chamber is sited, God shaped the river and the land and brought civilization and its bounty to the Nile Valley. But then Osiris was killed by his brother, and the land was plunged into violence and terror. Isis gathered her husband's body and bound it in linen. Then she changed into a bird and resurrected Osiris to a new life among the stars. Together they ruled over the night skies for eternity, with Osiris the god of resurrection. Resurrection was also the goal of Egypt's pharaohs.
Now, when a pharaoh died, his body was mummified and prepared like Osiris, and his soul was ready to ascend to the sky. His earthly mission fulfilled, and the dead king would depart to the sky. In effect, what we have here is a reenactment of the resurrection myth of Osiris told in stellar terms.
Bovell believes the purpose of the pyramid shafts was to send the pharaoh's soul to its place next to Osiris, and he's found compelling support.
I'm taking you inside the Pyramid of Unas, one of the kings who immediately followed the 4th dynasty. And here are the oldest religious writings in history. These are the pyramid texts, and they hold the key to the mystery of the pyramids. The meaning of these texts were nearly forgotten, because Egyptologists saw in them mainly a sun religion. But this isn't a religion of the day and the living. This is a religion
of the night and of the dead. These texts repeatedly tell us that the king becomes a star in the kingdom of Osiris, in the constellation of Orion. One of these texts says, "O king, you are a companion of Orion." And another text says, "May you traverse the winding waterway, the Milky Way, and may you go to the place where Orion is."
Everything here attests to a grand unified plan, a master plan. And yet there's something very perplexing about this plan. We have 3 pyramids, 2 of which are of almost identical size and are set along a diagonal line. And yet here's the curious thing. The 3rd pyramid is much smaller and is offset to the left.
corresponded to the Milky Way and the pyramids to Orion, but neither was perfectly matched with their position in 2500 BC. Bauval looked to other time periods.
Now let's look at the 3 stars in Orion's belt in relation to the Milky Way. Now, in order to get a perfect match with the pyramids on the ground, the sky needs to be rotated slightly anti-clockwise. This means going back in time, 3000 BC, 4000 BC, 5000 BC.
The computer follows Orion back over the millennia of its precessional cycle.
$7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, and in 10,500 BC, that's when we get the perfect match.
It's absolutely amazing.
Well, the whole arrangement freezes the time of 10,500 BC.
The pyramid builders made their terrestrial map to reflect Orion as it looked, and only as it looked, in 10,500 BC. But why? Hancock has a theory he knows sounds incredible. He likes to speculate that the idea of the pyramids was inherited from another culture. one that existed in 10,500 BC. That culture disappeared, but somehow their advanced knowledge of architecture, mathematics, and science was passed down through the ages. With that knowledge, the Egyptians of 2,500 BC built the pyramids. The monuments Hancock suggests are part of a legacy from a lost civilization.
We're not claiming that the pyramids are 12,500 years old. What we're saying is that the pyramids speak of that very distant date. There's no doubt in my mind that the Egyptians were the inheritors of an ancient knowledge and wisdom. It's absurd to suggest, as Egyptologists do, that these monuments were the creation of the infancy of a civilization. There's a huge accumulated knowledge and wisdom expressed in these monuments. These monuments, to me, are the end of something, not the beginning of something. To me, this almost impossible engineering feat conveys one clear message. Speaking to us across the gulf of ages, what the ancients are saying is we were not fools, and we weren't simpletons dancing after superstitious priests. We will show you our knowledge and precision. We did nothing by chance. Take us seriously.
As far as the new investigators are concerned, it's a message that's being sent by more than just the pyramids. On the Giza Plateau, in the shadow of the pyramids, lies a weather-beaten monument that has the body of a lion and the head of a man. Carved out of natural rock, there's no sure way to know how long it's been here. It's called the Sphinx. Egyptologists insist it was made 4,500 years ago when the three great pyramids were built. Others say the Sphinx was really built 8,000 years before the pyramids, at a time when no civilization should have existed.
All these people, they come by for a day or two to the plateau, and they come by with a theory, and they publish it. The theory has to be crazy. The theory has to be fantastic, because if you make a fantastic theory, you will make money and you will be famous. Many theories like this has been said about the Sphinx, but all of it gone with the wind, because we Egyptologists have a solid evidence to state that the Sphinx is dated to the time of Khafre, the builder of the second pyramid at the Giza Plateau.
Money isn't the issue here. I've been doing this for 20 years without making a bean out of it.
We've got to get to the bottom of this. The issue is to find the truth, and we require several disciplines to find out what all this is all about.
I don't think that Egyptology is up to the task at all. To come to a site like this with a one-dimensional view, a narrow perspective, and to claim that through that narrow funnel we can interpret this site is a grave disservice to humanity, because it's prevented other disciplines from exercising their intelligence here.
Robert Bovell, a construction engineer, and writers Graham Hancock and John A. West are the unorthodox observers questioning whether the Egyptologists' evidence really stacks up, like the claim that the head of the Sphinx is a rendering of Khafre. Frank Domingo, a forensic artist, joins them in the debate. He works with the New York Police Department and is an expert in identification. He was asked to compare the face on the only known statue of Khafre with that of the Sphinx. He concluded that the two weren't even of the same race.
After reviewing all the measurements, angles, and proportions, it's my conclusion that the Great Sphinx of Giza is not the same individual represented in the statue of the pharaoh Khafre.
Despite the controversy, independent investigators aren't surprised. John West has some daring theories of his own about the Sphinx, starting with its head.
Now you look at the head, you see that it's in much better condition than the body. Even though the head is cut of a much harder limestone. The difference between the condition of the head and the condition of the body is extreme. Perhaps even more important, the head is disproportionately small. Seen especially from the air, you see that the body of the Sphinx is long and flattened out, and the head almost looks like a pinhead stuck on the top of it. This, to us, is an indication that the head has been recarved. In other words, the head is not original to the Sphinx. At some point in its long history, the head was redone.
The investigators also think that the Giza Plateau is a map of the stars as they appeared in the skies in 10,500 BC. Graham Hancock explains.
Standing at Giza, the ancient astronomers faced an uninterrupted 360-degree horizon, which invited observations of the rising points of the sun and the stars. Another direction also drew their attention, the north-south line dividing the sky directly above their heads. And they observed the stars as they crossed this line. In 10,500 BC, when the three stars of Orion's belt crossed this line, they did so in a pattern that is exactly matched by the pattern of the three pyramids on the ground.
The Sphinx, they believe, is actually an astronomical marker of the vernal equinox, but not in 2500 BC when the Sphinx was supposedly built.
When the Sphinx is supposed to have been built, 2500 BC, the sun rose in the constellation of Taurus. It would have been utterly absurd for a pharaoh to have built an equinoctial marker in the form of a lion in that epoch. In fact, there's only one epoch when it would have been appropriate for the Sphinx to have been built in the form that it has. That was the age of Leo, beginning in the 11th millennium BC.
Every 2,000 years or so, a different constellation appears behind the sun and a new astrological age begins. The last time there was an age of Leo was 12,000 years ago. Robert Bovel explains.
At this special time in 10,500 BC, the sun would rise due east, directly in line with the Sphinx, at the rising of the constellation of Leo. Here comes the constellation of Leo breaking over the horizon. And here is the sun. So it's at this time, at the age of Leo, that the Sphinx would be gazing at its own image in the sky.
But if that isn't enough, there's more. Why is the Sphinx offset to the right of the main east-west axis of this pyramid, and why is that causeway sloping to the south of east? The ancient pyramid builders did nothing by chance. So what's the significance of this curious offset?
The computer has the answer. It shows us that this is the place where the sun would rise exactly in the direction of the causeway, 14 degrees to the right, in perfect alignment with the causeway. Now what do we have here? To the left is the constellation of Leo, and as we can see, it's half buried below the horizon, with its head and shoulders sticking out. And this is what they saw when they looked in the east, the sun rising along the direction of the causeway, and to the left, the Sphinx, half buried in the sand, with its head and shoulders sticking out of the sand, in the same way that the constellation of Leo would be seen rising over the horizon with its head and shoulders sticking over the horizon line.
The Sphinx and the pyramids link up to form a gigantic astronomical hologram of the skies above Egypt around the year 10,500 BC. In that epoch, and only in that epoch, the key celestial bodies are represented with faultless accuracy, viewed from every conceivable angle and direction. When we remember the uncanny precision with which the pyramid builders worked, it's impossible to ascribe such interlocking complexity to coincidence. What we have here
is a massive and deliberate time marker for the epoch of 10,500 BC, almost 8,000 years before Egyptian civilization is supposed to have begun.
Other evidence supports that date, especially the erosion on the Sphinx. John West believes it was caused not by sand, but by water. He says the evidence was there all along.
Well, nobody was looking for it. It's a bit like if you're looking for potatoes, you can walk right through a field full of diamonds and see a lot of nasty, glittering stones. So the geology was simply taken for granted. Nobody looked for it, nobody found it.
West's conclusion is based on the Sphinx's extremely distinctive pattern of weathering.
You don't even have to be a geologist to look at it and see what must have been responsible for that kind of weathering. Only water pouring in sheets over the enclosure wall could have produced those rounded contours.
Though the age of any stone is difficult to determine, a history of the rock can be constructed by looking at the characteristics of its erosion. When stone is exposed to wind and sand, the telltale sign is that the layers appear soft and scoured out. This kind of erosion is found everywhere in Giza. But the Sphinx and its surrounding pit are worn differently. These show a different kind of erosion altogether, a round, undulating profile, usually caused by rainwater and torrential downpours. When confronted with this evidence, Egyptologists theorized that the flooding of the Nile could have caused the damage. West disagrees.
No, absolutely not, because the Nile floods would come in from the bottom, and if it had been flooding by Nile waters, you'd have a different pattern of erosion. You'd have the walls undercut. In other words, you'd have the deepest erosion at the bottom, not at the top. And you also wouldn't get those deep fissures.
West's discovery raised many questions. In a debate, geologists sided with West. Egyptologists have offered few replies to his conclusions. Journalist Paul Roberts covered the controversy.
West is really an academic's worst nightmare, because here comes somebody way out of left field with a thoroughly well thought out, well presented, coherently described, beautifully written, full of data you can't refute, and it pulls the rug from beneath your feet. So how do they deal with it? They ignore it. They hope it'll go away. And it won't go away.
Repair work done on the Sphinx seems to lend credence to West's theory.
Here we're looking at a section of the earliest repairs. You see that some 2 to 3 feet of repair blocks were necessary in order to bring the Sphinx back to its original contours. We're told that these repairs were done within 300 years of the original carving of the Sphinx. Now the question arises, why would 3 feet of repairs be necessary over the course of just some 300 years? Egyptologists insist that the stone the Sphinx is carved from is of such poor quality that it weathered away 3 feet in just 300 years. This presents another problem. If the stone the Sphinx is carved from is of such poor quality, and the Sphinx was carved 4,500 years ago, it means that at the erosion rate of a foot a century, the Sphinx would have disappeared some 500 years ago. Well, it hasn't.
Even if the repairs were done because of water damage, a major question is still unanswered. When was there water in the desert? The answer is surprising. At the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago.
This was a time in the history of mankind when the Earth was passing through an unprecedented upheaval. A tremendous cataclysm was taking place in the Earth 12,500 years ago. This was the end of the last ice age. There had been 50 or 60,000 years of relatively stable conditions with millions of square miles of ice covering the northern hemisphere. And suddenly, for reasons that no scientist has yet fully fathomed out, all of this ice melted in a span of just 2,000 to 3,000 years.
The ice cap that covered northern Europe and America back then was 2 miles thick. the melting was sudden and widespread and created floods of biblical proportions. Egyptologist Fikra Hassan explains.
Egypt experienced major and dramatic changes at the end of the Ice Age, particularly about 10,500 BC, when very high, exceptionally high floods covered the floodplain and ended things both in the Delta and the Nile Valley in general.
West developed his theory.
I think the history of the Sphinx goes something like this. Long ago, before Egypt became desert, the Giza Plateau was a fertile savanna. At its very edge was a large outcrop of natural rock. An unknown group of sculptors, taking advantage of its prominent position, carved the rock into a giant face. It may have been the face of a god or of a lion. Time passed. Shifting weather patterns brought torrential rain to the area, signaling the end of the Ice Age. The rains weathered the lion to virtually the shape we see today. When the rain stopped, the once fertile savanna turned into Sahara Desert. The wind-blown sands buried the statue up to its neck, for thousands of years, protecting the body and its telltale traces of water weathering. But what about the face? Still eroding away, diminishing in size. Possibly it was recarved. Certainly the 4th dynasty kings who built the pyramids around 2500 BC uncovered the Sphinx and further fashioned the face in their image. Pharaoh Khephren didn't build the Sphinx, he restored it.
Proof of their theories, West and his fellow investigators point to another structure they believe could date to 10,000 BC. It too shows unmistakable signs of being weathered by vast amounts of water. It's the Osiren at Abydos. It was found early in the 20th century, buried under sand.
Here, some 500 miles south of Giza, at the Osirion, we find ourselves amidst another of those enigmatic, anonymous structures that seem to date to no known epoch. 50 feet or more below the floor of surrounding pharaonic temples. Is it possible that this is just one amongst many structures like this buried beneath the sands of Egypt? Later pharaohs came and added their reliefs to these walls, but originally this structure was anonymous and bare, left for future generations to interpret.
Those who hold unorthodox views about the Giza Plateau find further confirmation in the Egyptian creation myth, what the ancients called the first time. Bauval explains.
Every civilization refers to a creation myth, a beginning. But the Egyptians were extremely clear about what had happened in the beginning. They tell us the earth was totally covered with water, and that the physical, the material earth sprang out of the water, and we had a primeval mound on which creation began, on which there was the first dawn, the first sunrise. It's as if, for example, the king who built those pyramids was reenacting that moment, that time of the gods. It would be normal for them to want to commemorate it, to freeze it, if you like, in a grandiose expression. I think if there is the original primeval mound, that's it, Giza. Indeed, the texts refer to the place of Giza, of Heliopolis, as being the location of creation. Perhaps we should take them literally. They tell us that this is the place of creation. And what else we would expect of that fantastic moment of creation than monuments of this sort to commemorate it?
Conventional observers don't think the ideas of Hancock, Bauval, and West are persuasive. To the Egyptologists, the new theories just raise too many problems.
If we were to take the alternative view, think of what we're stuck with. We have an antediluvian civilization, and then you have nothing. You have nothing for how long? 1,000 years, 2,000 years? And then it starts up again. Where's the link?
Where is the other evidence of this culture? Where? Show me a pot shard. Show me a tomb. Show me an inscription. Show me any other piece of sculpture. Show me any archaeological site that dates to this period.
That's like telling Magellan, after he'd sailed around the world, that the world is still flat, because where are the other guys who've sailed around it? What's at issue here is the entire history of civilization. It may not have gone in a straight line from stupid old cavemen to smart old us with our hydrogen bombs and our striped toothpaste.
Every sleuth looks for answers, for proof that will solve his case. An ancient papyrus exists that intimates there's hidden information yet to be found, secrets waiting to unfold. It's in the Berlin Museum and points to Thoth, the god of wisdom, who was said to have described the mysteries of heaven in sacred books.
It's like a treasure map on which X almost, but not quite, marks the spot where the gold doubloons are buried. This ancient papyrus tells the story of how Cheops, the builder of the Great Pyramid, sought in Heliopolis for a mysterious black box containing the number of the secret chambers of the sanctuary of Thoth. What was this Ark of Thoth, some repository of ancient wisdom that Cheops needed in order to construct his pyramid?
If there really is such wisdom buried in a black box, where could it be? It's possible it's concealed in the pyramids, hidden in some unknown chamber and blocked from view by those who wish to keep it secret. And there's also a possibility it lies in the Sphinx.
Our seismographs revealed that right here, where I'm standing, between the paws of the Sphinx, there is a large underground chamber, some 12 by 15 meters, rectangular in shape, 5 meters under the surface of the bedrock.
So far, official permission has not been given for the excavation. Perhaps beneath the paws of the Great Sphinx of Giza lies evidence of a civilization older than Egypt. For as long as recorded history, there have been stories of early lost civilizations. Egyptian priests spoke of one called Atlantis. Could the monuments on the Giza Plateau be clues telling us of the existence of a forgotten time of human history? The new breed of investigators wonder and continue to turn over every stone in the search for more evidence that will reveal the secrets of ancient Egypt.